a third mate license, and she has been on a ship. She was out for about 8 months, courtesy of COVID, and was back. She just finished working on California Maritime's training ship. And tonight she's flying to Houston, where she's going to start a new job with a shipping company out of a Danish shipping company that is out of Houston. So that was her experience. And the advantage about tuition there is that SUNY Maritime is our regional maritime school. Virginia does not have a maritime school, and so there's a region tuition. Not the same as if you're a New York resident, but still better than if you're from somewhere else. Our fourth child was loved playing football, really found a passion in IB design tech, and we looked for a Division II school where he could study this applied engineering program to become a teacher and also play football. And he landed at Millersville University in Lancaster, right outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He's had a great experience. It's been difficult. It's been difficult because of COVID, but he's just really loved the learning he's had and had a great internship last summer. And again, Pennsylvania schools are very inviting and have a different tuition scale for Virginia residents. So that's our little story. Lots of cool things happening and kids learning and figuring out what's best for them. And I hope that will be helpful to you as you are going through this journey and trying to figure out the best place for your son or daughter. So thanks so much. I'll hand it over. Let me double check. Let me see. Is all working? Oh, and now Mrs. Kurtner is going to take over to tell you about the next part of our program. Mrs. Kurtner?
Hi, thank you. Let me turn my video on here. Oh, I'm not able to turn my video on. Okay, and I'm also not able to share my screen, but I did want to talk you through a little background just to help kind of give you a roadmap through the 4 years here at high school, since we've invited 9th through 12th graders to join us tonight. So if you're in 9th grade, really what we want your focus to be is setting a strong foundation for your growth over the next 4 years. And what this looks like is giving yourself a chance to explore, meaning picking out classes and building a schedule that is interesting, that challenges you, that gives you a chance to really demonstrate your skills and abilities, but then also room for growth in those areas. But it also means building a foundation in your communication skills and learning how to interact, not just with peers, but with the adults in the building and the resources that are available to you. So our first recommendation out there for our freshmen is to start checking your email daily and then to respond to those emails. And really that's just building those communication skills a little bit further. So for our 10th graders, what we want you to think about is finding your focus. So now that you have this strong foundation, your goal will be to decide how you want to spend the next 3 years here and what are your interests. One of the best ways that you can start to kind of narrow your interests down is through a tool called Career Cluster on Naviance. What we recommend is, you take this and then you take those considerations. They're not set in stone, but it's a good way to get to know yourself a little bit better. And then use your, Then use your time outside of school to start getting involved and exploring the extracurricular activities that are available to you. There we go. And then our final slide is, what are we thinking about as we are in our junior year? And really, this is where we start showing and demonstrating the effort and the growth that you've made and that you're making into your 12th grade year. So you should be able to answer these questions in both looking at your academic schedule, but then also the activities and things that you're prepared with, or that you're involved with, outside of school. SATs and ACTs, usually by the middle to end of your junior year, you will have taken one of these tests or begin to prepare to take them at least over the summer so that you're ready for your senior year and you have those scores available. And as always, talking with your school counselor and making sure that your schedule is a true reflection of balance and meeting both your interest and your abilities. On the other side, by the time you're a senior, these are the recommendations down below that we have, is really starting to explore the colleges that might be a right fit for you. Naviance is a huge resource to start that college search. You can search for, public universities, private universities, size of the university. You can see how other students from Marshall have done as far as like applying and being accepted into those schools. It's important to think about how you're going to be paying for college and considering the FAFSA in your area. And then, of course, taking a tour, visiting schools in person when you're able to, and if not, at least trying to get on a virtual tour. And then Mr. Humphreys will later share about another opportunity through his room. So hopefully this is a good roadmap just to get you thinking of where should I be right now. Thank you.
Can you get it for me? Good evening, everyone. I'm Doug Sawitsky, one of the school counselors here at Marshall. And for my part of the presentation, I will be speaking to seniors and families on the application process to four-year colleges. Before I begin, I just want to say, as the year goes along, we will eventually be discussing other post-secondary options such as community college, military, and gap year opportunities. For those here looking to learn more about that, stay tuned and reach out to us whenever with those types of questions. Now, to seniors embarking on the college application process, there's no getting around that this can be a stressful few months as you approach a major life transition. And I can only imagine the additional questions you may have based on how different this last year and a half has been. I want to assure you, though, that this is not as daunting as it seems, and everyone will end up in good fit options for them. I feel very confident saying that, having gone through this process with 5 senior classes now. And my goal for tonight is to try and break down the parts of the college application process for you all the best that I can. And I apologize again, we're having issues with the presentation, but what my slide shows and what we present to juniors in the springtime is the idea of there being 4 buckets to manage in this process, which are standardized testing, transcripts and letters of recommendation, college applications, and the financial aid bucket. And what we want students to do is metaphorically put buckets down or hand them off so that they can stop worrying about the weight of all of them and shift their focus to certain ones. So that first bucket I talk about is the testing bucket, which is the SATs and the ACTs, and this usually comes first. Realizing that some of our students may start testing earlier, it is a general practice that students should plan on taking the SAT and or the ACT at least once by the end of their junior year, usually in the spring. Then students use the summer or fall of their senior year to try to improve those scores as needed. The nice thing about multiple attempts is a lot of colleges will super score, meaning they take your highest section scores from multiple testing attempts and combine them. Now, for this senior group, one of the elephants in the room is that you all did not obviously get a traditional testing window with all of the shutdowns. Colleges understand this, and I would say the vast majority are remaining test optional for this graduating class. In Virginia, the most selective schools to include UVA, Virginia Tech, and William & Mary will all be test optional this cycle. And really, I believe every public university in Virginia will be. What this means is if you have a consistent academic record in terms of grades and coursework, it is certainly a fair option to take advantage of the test optional choice, and it will not be a penalty to you at all. If you feel you want to test to see how you do, however, or because you may need to improve your metrics, it's certainly fair to test this fall. And hopefully the test optional policies, though, will help alleviate and potentially eliminate this bucket altogether for many in the class of 2022. Now, do note, we will be offering a free SAT to seniors on October 13th with a registration deadline next week on September 8th. You all should have received an email from your school counselor with that information should you want to test on that day. And the last piece of testing I'm going to talk about is just for those who do want to submit scores to colleges. This is done by the student and not through us at Marshall. So you will go through College Board or ACT to send score reports directly to the colleges and universities. Read what is required from each school and save yourself some money, as a lot of schools will take self-reporting scores and do not require an official copy until the student selects a school. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about letters of recommendation and transcript request. And this is something we want you to pass on to our school counseling team. In the spring of junior year, students work on a senior information packet that goes to their counselors. This packet has the student answer questions about themselves, as well as the parent and guardian answer questions about their senior, and it assists counselors in writing a comprehensive letter of recommendation. If you are a senior and did not submit this, you should be working on it now, as we will not take transcript requests without this document completed. Letters of recommendation requirements are going to vary from school to school, so research what is needed. Some require just a counselor letter, and some will require 1 to 2 teacher letters as well. The counselor letter in general summarizes a high school student's career, their achievements and obstacles. View this as a big picture letter, whereas a teacher letter generally focuses on the student's contributions in a specific class or content area. Students should quickly reach out and ask teachers they need letters from if they have not already done so. And for counselors, it is generally assumed we'll be writing letters for our students, and they will indicate it on their transcript request form. You all should have also received an email from your counselor with the transcript request form and instructions spelled out. It's what we'll be talking about in our senior breakout sessions after this event for those who want to attend. But just real quickly on that, on the front of the sheet, we'll have the instructions, and we ask that you check the box to waive the right to read letters of recommendation by FCPS employees, as this choice will be marked on your application, and letters not waived will carry much less weight and can be viewed as a red flag to the admissions offices. This form will be due on September 17th for those applying to colleges with a deadline on or before November 15th, and November 12th for those applying with later deadlines. You can turn in more forms later to add colleges to your list, but it's important we get that initial one so we can allow time for all our materials to get sent. And then just real quick, things you will answer on the back of the form are obviously the colleges you're applying to, the deadlines, the type of decision, which I'll touch on in a second, and the portal you are submitting your application through. For portals, we have you indicate Common App or Other. Other can include applications directly through the school or using another portal such as Coalition. And any way you apply is totally fine with us. Just remember, it's important that it matches what the student does. Note for Common App, you need to invite counselors to upload your documents in the portal, and the students can see materials are submitted. For other portals, we have an electronic way of submitting, but you won't be able to follow in real time. Moving on to the next slide, which is kind of the where we're going to get started today, and that's the application process bucket. And the first question you got to ask is, when am I going to apply? And you generally have 4 options, and what colleges offer will vary. And those options are early decision, early action, regular decision, and rolling. Just a real quick overview, early decision is binding and means the application will be obligated, or the applicant will be obligated to attend the school they're accepted to. You can only apply to 1 school early decision, and students will sometimes utilize this for a reach school, as admissions rates can be slightly higher, as the applicant will be demonstrating the most serious interest to their top choice college. The downside is because early decision programs are binding, the applicant will not always be able to choose among other schools that may have offered more financial aid or garnered more interest from the applicant later on in the process. Early action applications allow the students to apply to colleges by an earlier deadline and receive admissions decisions sometime in December or January. Over the years, this is what most of our students have been utilizing. Early action applications will look at grades through the end of junior year, and your senior year schedule as a decision will be made before senior semester grades are ever submitted to colleges. If you really need to utilize senior year to get your grades up or show growth, you may want to apply regular decisions, as colleges can then take senior year more into account. Also note, though, it is common for those who apply early to potentially get deferred to the regular decision batch as well. And regular decision deadlines generally fall between January and February, and you'll find out in the springtime. For both early action and regular decision, you'll have until May 1st to make your final college choice. And then finally, all rolling admissions means is they'll review your file and give you a decision as the school receives all of your materials. What you've probably heard me say a lot of times now is it depends on the school. Colleges have different deadlines, application types, required materials, and even tell us different preferences. So you really should keep a spreadsheet of what is due and required when. It will help a lot come deadline time. The other part, Mr. Humphreys is really going to touch on essays, but we do have sessions in the College and Career Center to help you. And we'll also have people that can review your essays whenever you need any of that. Moving on to the next slide, and this is one I'm just going to gloss over, and that's financial aid. Note, we'll have an evening event on October 19th that covers this in depth, but I do want to say, do your FAFSA even if you think you won't qualify for financial aid. Schools often are going to require it for merit-based aid. The application for FAFSA opens on October 1st and may provide additional opportunities to include grants, work study, and better loan rates through the government. And then the last slide I'm going to show is just something us counselors can do sometimes is help you come up with a reasonable list of colleges. And sorry, the next slide. And for tonight's show, my favorite resource that students can use to identify target, reach, and safety schools is on your Naviance account, where you can look at the college profile and you'll see the option to click on a school scattergram. The scattergrams show how Marshall applicants over the past several years have fared with regard to being accepted in green, waitlisted or deferred in blue, and denied in red. And you can see the average GPA, SAT, and ACT scores and how you stack up. If you are above the averages or around primarily green, it's probably what we call a safety school. If around the averages, it's what we'll call a target. And if you are below the averages, it's what we call a reach school. So maybe you're in the red. Just because you may be below, though, does not mean it can't happen. And a lot of variables go into these decisions. We bring this up now just so as students turn in their transcript request, hopefully they have targets on there as well as a safety school when they come with their list. With that, thank you all for your time and being here, and I look forward to chatting with the senior families afterward. Right now, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Mr. Humphreys, our College and Career Center specialist.
Good evening, folks. We can't afford more than one office here, but Mr. Switzky and I are sharing because I'm having some technical difficulties on my side. Welcome. I'm Gardner Humphreys, the College and Career Specialist, and I just want to get you up to speed on what the rest of the evening is going to look like. So you can know where we're at and what's coming ahead. For those of you who don't know, I have a College and Career Center off the main lobby of the school. And what I want to do right now is go through and just give you a look at the agenda. So as you can see right here, we've been through the first two parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about the resources you can get from the College and Career Center and what the rest of the night's going to look like. And then we're going to have a guest speaker from the University of Virginia, which we're very excited about. And the last portion of the evening will be very important if you want to speak directly with your counselor or ask a question. We're going to have breakout sessions at the end. That should be roughly around 7:05, 7 o'clock, 7:05. You'll be able to ask more questions about how the process works, especially senior year when you're working with your counselor. And I'm going to post towards the end, when you click on the breakout room icon on your screen down near the controls, it's going to give you an option for breakout rooms, and it's going to have the name of the counselor, and it's also going to have the alpha that they cover. So you just look it up by the last name of your student, and then you join that particular breakout room, and you'll be in the right spot. Okay, so just a quick snapshot. Like I said, the College and Career Center. So here's a few of the sort of supports I offer students and parents. You can always come in. It's great to meet with students and parents either together, separately, or separately and then together, and just work on your own plans and what you're looking for. I think a lot of the college process has to be personalized, and I can help people kind of identify what your priorities are, come up with a list of schools that just go beyond reputation or beyond admission rate or things like that. Try to find things that are a really sensible place where the student's going to do well, really develop, really prosper. And we can cover all those things that Mr. Switzky was looking at earlier. We have admissions data, which I have on kind of my side of Naviance, our main college and career tool that isn't always there. Sometimes those scattergrams don't have enough data for students and parents. I can share more of that. And I do a lot with affording college and financial aid. So a lot of the best work in college is not around the time that you're just submitting your applications and waiting for the answer. It's upfront doing the research to find out which universities would save you money. Which honor programs might you want to join? Which ones have, special opportunities. And that's really a great way to meet your goals, is to put in the time up front and then be really content with your list once you get there. Other information, I do post student jobs for the summer and after school. Also information on finding volunteer opportunities, internships, summer programs. Most of this is in my Schoology course. So students know where that is. Parents who go on the Fairfax County website, there's a link to Schoology. You can either go through Fairfax County, or if you go on the Marshall homepage, there's a Schoology link down there, and you can log in there and see the courses for your student. And also all parents and students are enrolled in one called Marshall Student Services. And that's kind of like the content where we can put the most things. So that will have different folders in it. For me, you look at the College and Career Center folder, and they'll have a folder on financial aid, college searching, different things. And we just started building it the first week of school. So not everything's in there yet, but there are some things in there, and it will grow week to week. For easier, quicker access, some of the highlights of resources are on our general school website. You go to the Student Services section and you click on College and Career Center. And for example, this evening's recording will be on school presentations, where we have a lot of the presentations from last year as well. And we'll be posting all this year's presentations. So that's a quick kind of recap of the resources you can get from me. Here's some events coming up. We are going to have our financial aid night on October 19th at 6 o'clock. That's going to be virtual. Also, there's an in-school SAT for seniors, and also a practice or PSAT for grades 10 and 11, but not for 9th grade, coming up on October 13th. It's free for all the students who take it, but if you're a senior and you want to take it on October 13th, you have to submit an intent form, a Google form, which you should have gotten your email, but you can email me if you have not gotten it yet. And my emails, I'll put it back up on the agenda slide later. And also, if you are 10th or 11th, you don't need to pay for it, and you just come to school. You'll get email about the directions, but there's no registration for 10th or 11th, but seniors do have to submit the Google form. We're going to have senior essay help. That's essay, college essay help for seniors, starting on September 13th, and it's going to be from 3 to 4 every day. It's going to go throughout the winter. And we can also do it online. I have a group of volunteer advisors who are very good at this, and we're available both online and in person. And we're going to do another event in the spring for rising 10th to 12th graders. We have Junior Focus Day on April 14th, which is going to be in school, and it's kind of like a mini conference, takes up most of the day, and they can pick all different kinds of college career-related sessions to go to. And then we offer the vocational military assessment called the ASVAB twice a year, and we usually do that in November. We don't have a date yet from the service, but I'll email that out when we have it. So just a reminder to look out for the breakout rooms when we get towards the end of the guest speaker. But right now, I would love to welcome Ms. Janine Lalonde from the University of Virginia, who's been a great partner to Marshall and really all the schools around here, and does an incredible job of, I think, giving very useful, actionable information to a school, which is difficult to get into and can create stress for some students. But I think she's really helped so many of our students kind of put it in perspective, do their best job, and kind of help guide them through the process and help them get to where they're going. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Janine Lalonde.
Thanks so much, Gardner. I am going to share my screen so that you all can see some slides from me, and I think everyone can see this. First and foremost, just so you know, I do specialize in working with Fairfax students, but by no means are students required to talk to me. There is a dean on call at our office and at almost every admission office in the country to answer your questions by phone, by email, by social media, and I'll wrap my session up with just a reminder about that. But I am always happy to talk to Fairfax families, students, or parents. I'm happy to talk to anyone, so please feel free to reach out if you feel like I have the answer to your questions. I really hope I do. Let's start with some good news. And if you want a UVA info session, you can sign up for that on the UVA website. I am going to talk about the admission process in general, and I'll use some examples perhaps from my experience. So let's start with the good news. The good news is that the majority of colleges in this country admit the majority of their applicants, and highly selective and selective schools like mine are not normal. Sometimes from the chatter that you hear, you'll get the idea that selective schools are normal. We are not. And here are some numbers to show that. There are roughly 4,000 colleges in the country. Only about 20 have an offer rate that is under 10%, and only about 60 have an offer rate that's under 20%. So the majority of colleges are going to be eager to admit their applicants. There are multiple great homes for every student. Even when I would love to say that UVA is the best home for every student, but I know everyone can't come to my school. And I am confident that if you like UVA, there are other fabulous schools that would be exciting for you as well. I don't think we should kind of set our students up to think that happiness is only found at one institution. And I also want to remind everyone that we are extremely lucky in Virginia. First of all, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to four-year college options. We have an enormous two-year option, the community college program, and every college, every public college and most of the private colleges in Virginia have guarantee admission agreements with the community college system. So that means there is a path to almost every school that a student can have on their list in this state. We just have to open up our understanding of what those paths are. Our students are all different. Their paths don't necessarily have to be the same. Clearly, a lot of students are going to be interested in going right away to a four-year institution, but the two-year to four-year option is a really sound one for many reasons in this state. And one thing I'll add that I don't say to anyone unless I'm talking to Fairfax County people is, you are so lucky to be in Fairfax County Public Schools. First of all, the fact that there are college and career centers in every public school in the county is amazing. There are a lot of districts that do not have a resource like this. In addition, you have Gardner Humphreys, and I don't know if you realize this, but he has been around for a really long time. I met Gardner, I can't even remember what year, but it was pre-renovation, and I can't even remember when the renovation was at Marshall, but it was a long time ago. So you not only have this amazing resource in your building, but you also have a person running it who has been around the block several times. So use your resources, and hopefully you will feel like you're walking into this with a team of people between the counseling office and the Career Center, a team of people who are rooting for you and helping you through this. Okay, now let's talk about how admission officers look at the application process. And I'm going to start with data. I love data. If you're not into data, it's going to be short and quick, and then we'll get into other stuff. But here's the data. So every year, the professional organization that admission officers belong to and Career Center and professionals belong to, it's called NACAC, they poll admission people about lots of different things. And this is a little bit dated at this point. It's from a couple years ago, but this is the result of a question asking admission people to talk about the different components of an application and how important they were in the process. And granted, it's 200 or so schools out of the 4,000, but it gives you insight into how admission people approach the application. First and foremost will be the academic work. Hopefully that's not a surprise. Students are students first and foremost. Coursework and grades are a lot of information, and transcripts, along with the items that the counseling folks submit, give us a lot of information about how the student has progressed over the last 4 years. Keep in mind the fact that testing is on here in the 4th spot. I don't think that would remain there now that so many of us have gone test optional. But then you see writing, interest at schools that use it, recommendations, essays, we talked about essays, activities, those things fall in as well. But keep in mind, academics come first. 4 years of academic development are really interesting in the college admission process. So let's talk about some of those things. First, transcripts. The high school profile is submitted by the counselor, and that's kind of the first stop before you even go to the transcript. The high school profile explains how the school operates. So for Marshall, it'll explain that this is an IB school, and here are the options available to students. So an admission officer isn't going to say, well, why don't we see ACE classes here? If you don't know what that is, it's okay, because they're not offered at Marshall. So it explains what's allowed, and we use that as to kind of calibrate to move on to the transcript to see what the student did in light of the things they were offered at their school. So admission officers do not compare students from one place to another. That wouldn't make any sense. A student is at their high school. We have to look at what did they do in light of what they're allowed to do there. I know that a lot of people are fixated on GPAs. I will tell you that in Virginia, this is just not where especially in Virginia, it's not where we find meaning, because it's different from county to county. And keep in mind that in a lot of processes, you need to see specific coursework and grades to understand a student's path, and the GPA does not give you that detail. Consider that you could have tons of students with the same GPA, but totally different trends and courses and grades on their transcripts. So we don't even recalculate a GPA at UVA because it still would be meaningless. I need to see the actual classes that the student has chosen to take. And obviously in an IB program, you're looking at where did they opt for their HLs? Where did they take their SLs? Sometimes when IB schools also offer APs or dual enrollment, you might see a little of that sprinkled in. So the transcript almost tells you a story that the GPA could never tell you. Course rigor is not a number. I hope that's obvious. These days, just because you can rack up a lot of advanced courses doesn't mean that you're guaranteed admission somewhere, especially at a school like mine. We're looking at what did the student do in their different core subjects. We want to see that they have a really nice, broad foundation, remembering that they'll major when they get to college, sometimes after a year or two. But in high school, they're supposed to be getting a really nice foundation from which to leap into college level work. And this is just a small little piece of advice. The Common App has an additional info section, and I think it's really smart for students to use that to address anomalies. If there was a scheduling conflict that prevented them from taking a certain class, or maybe they got very sick at some point and they missed a lot of class, and that's why there's a little shaky grade somewhere. I think it's really smart to address that. Sometimes I think that students think, well, if I don't look and talk about it, look at it or talk about it, then people might miss it. No, a lot of times admission officers will say, why isn't anyone talking about this one thing that's a little bit different? So make sure that the student knows anomalies are okay. Being a teenager is not a smooth route. So it's okay if things aren't perfect. But if there's a big stumble, then maybe encourage the student to address it and talk about how their rebound is going. Okay, next, let's talk about recommendations. So a lot of schools will tell you exactly what they want in their application instructions. And it's interesting, sometimes people will try to convince you that the application instructions aren't really what admission people want and that you should give them other things, which is really funny to me, because I think, if we say, we would like you to do X and Y, and if you say, well, I don't want to do that, I'm going to do Z, that can be a little bit frustrating on our side. So when we tell you to do, submit this kind of recommendation, just do that. Keep it simple. Just fulfill the instructions. So we say we want one counselor recommendation or one teacher recommendation. Those are two really good perspectives to have. All recommendations are positive. You don't have to worry about that. What makes them different are the little anecdotes that are told about the student. So teacher may talk about a really impressive assignment that went beyond what they were expecting from that student, or they might talk about a discussion where something the student said really took things in a new direction that was really helpful. So I think the student should try to think about who the teacher is that could tell that story. And all my friends who are teachers say it's really great when the student reminds them of some of those things when they ask for the recommendation. If they say, oh, by the way, just so you remember, my final project was the one about X, and I wrote that paper about Y. Sometimes that can help the teacher say, oh, okay, now I know the examples that I might use when I talk about the student and their performance in the classroom. Some colleges, by the way, will allow non-academic recommendations in the common application. I'm not familiar with all other kinds of applications, but in the common application, colleges have the ability to turn on and off parts of the application that they find helpful, and they can turn off things that they don't use. So if a school has a certain thing like a non-academic function turned off, it just means that's not something that they care to use in their review process. Let's talk about activities. I think that this gets a lot of energy from people when they're fretting about the admission process. And especially in the last year, a lot of people have been worried that students with limited access to their activities are going to be penalized. And I'll just remind you that everyone has been through and is still going through the pandemic. And we do not expect students to have unfettered access to school and school activities. Goodness knows I wasn't in my office for a good part of the last year. And so I totally understand that the students haven't had access to all the same things. So I do think that it's fine for a student to say, you know what, I was a runner. Okay, my track season didn't happen, but I was still a runner, right? You might be in Model UN, and just because the conference got canceled doesn't mean you weren't making a contribution and you weren't involved in that thing, even though the activities that club usually would have done didn't happen. So don't worry about that. Colleges will make adjustments. I want to just hopefully remind you that activities should be rewarding. They should be things that the student finds exciting and interesting to do. I think that schools that are my size don't have to engineer variety in the first year class. So when we get to the activity section, we're really just looking to see, like, what does the student do with themselves when they get to decide how their time gets spent? Where do they decide to make a contribution? And it could be at school, or it could be at home, it could be through a job, it could be in their community. We're not super picky. My school has over 900 student organizations, so I always laugh when people try to get us to say what kind of activities we value. We value them all. They all make things interesting. So whatever a student is involved in, we're usually excited to read about it. There's no certain kind of student at a school my size. Perhaps at a very small school, there may be a little bit more crafting of the class, but I have 3,900 first years right now. There are specialists and there are generalists and there are well-rounded kids and there are pointy kids, and all makes things fun. So I don't have to scrutinize activity lists the way I think a lot of students and parents think I do. There is something I will address online. There are a lot of people trying to tell students that they have to have a spike and they have to have a theme. Like if they think they want to be a psychology major, then everything has to be geared towards psychology. I think this is bad advice. I think that they're forgetting that we work with teenagers for a living, and I'm totally fine if a student doesn't know what they want to study, or if they have activities that have nothing to do with their current academic interest. I also know that the data says students who say they have a major in mind tend to change their mind over the next year or two. Imagine that, teenagers. So let's not get too scary about telling people that the activity list needs to be all geared towards one theme. And the last thing I'll say, this is the sneak preview, was when I said we work with teenagers. Long-term involvement is not necessary. I am totally fine if a student has changed their interests over time. This idea that everyone needed to find a passion when they were 14 years old and sustain it over 4 years is interesting. And there are definitely students who are like that, but there are definitely students who jump around a bit and are still finding things of interest as they discover new activities. So I'm okay. No one has ever come into my office and said, I love this student, I would like to admit them, but I can't because they stopped playing soccer. It just would never happen, all right? And by the way, I like to say that if a junior or senior came to me and said, I need to cut back because I'm overwhelmed and I have a lot of schoolwork to do, I'd say that's a sign of maturity if they step away from an activity. I'm okay with that. maybe they'll come back to it in college and maybe they won't, but I'm okay if the activity list goes a little bit shorter as the academic responsibilities get heavier. All right, let's talk about testing really quickly. Obviously, you already heard a lot of schools went test optional. Hopefully at the beginning of my talk, you heard me say that 4 years is definitely way more interesting than numbers like GPAs, and testing falls in there too. I would much rather see sustained performance in the classroom on the transcript than stare at 2 and 3 digit scores. It takes 4 seconds to look at someone's testing. It takes a lot longer to understand their academic story from the transcript and read their recommendations and essays. Testing is optional, which means if someone has some testing and they think it's nice and they would like to include it, they should. If they don't have testing, or they have it and they're not proud of it, they should not worry about it. They should move on. There have always been optional parts of the application, and a lot of testing has been part of the optional stuff, like AP and IB exams, subject tests, which no longer exist for our students, but those have always been optional. We've just added the SAT and ACT to the optional items. So I think it's really simple. And if you're having a hard time, the student should talk to their counselor to decide whether they should include some of their testing or not. All right, no one's going to get in trouble if they don't submit something that wasn't required in the first place. Okay, I'm going to just really quickly talk about some essay misconceptions, because you have some writing some advice coming up, which Mr. Gardner showed. You have some sessions coming up about essay writing. I won't go deep on this, but I just want to say, number one, essays do not have to be completely unique. Essays do not have to set a student apart. Some people say, how do I stand out in the admission process? Well, from my perspective, we're going to admit 9,000 to 10,000 students. So someone doesn't have to stand out in their essay. I need to see a competent writer who is able to share something that isn't coming through in the rest of the application. But it doesn't need to be someone who has discovered something that's no one's discovered before, or managed to achieve something that no one else has achieved. That's not the order of the day. It's not to stand out. It's to share things that aren't coming through in the rest of the application. Next up, essays do not have to relate to a student's current academic interest. While there is sometimes colleges will ask, what is your interest right now, and why does that interest you? By no means do all the essays have to focus on that thing. In fact, I would say don't do that, which leads into the next point. If you have multiple opportunities to write, you should write about different things, other things that we might not know about a student from their application. And there's a lot of people who say you need to avoid anything controversial. So no politics, no religion, no current events. And I'd say if a student is passionate about that topic, it is totally fine to write about it. I don't have to totally agree with what they say to think that they wrote a thoughtful and well done essay. All right. So again, we work with teenagers, and some of the joy in this is getting a sense of the different voices and personalities that are in the applicant pool. And I'm going to just finish up with a couple things. I know that some of you have probably started dipping your toe in the college search, but many of you are probably just kind of thinking about how to get started. And the first thing I'll say is that in Northern Virginia, you're very lucky because you have access to lots of colleges in a very small geographic area. And I'm not saying that they all will wind up on a student's final list, but there is a way for you to see a city campus and then a residential campus, a large public school and a small private school, all within a very small area without, spending too much time either. And I think that it's nice just to get your feet on different kinds of campuses. Again, not saying that any of these schools are going to become schools on your list, but it's nice to say, okay, I think I do like the feel of this larger public, even though on paper, I originally thought I wanted a small school. So I think it's nice to sample the schools in the area before you commit to maybe making visits a little bit further afield. I also think that students should think about what their non-negotiables are as they get started. What are the things you need in a college to be happy? And some of those are going to be serious academic things, and others are going to be student life things, the fun stuff. I think that when a student is happy, they will be more engaged. I could get the best professor in front of you, but if you're not happy at your school, then you might not get as much out of the experience. So I think the student should go into tours and visits and information sessions with those non-negotiables in mind. I was a tour guide when I was an undergrad, and I know a lot of our tour guides at UVA, and tour guides tend to be the happiest of the happy students. They can make you think their school is the best place ever, but is it the best place ever for you? If you have your non-negotiables in mind, you can start thinking, okay, this is a wonderful school, but it's wonderful for this tour guide. It might not be wonderful for me because it doesn't fit all of my needs. And that leads to this next thing. We need to focus on making matches for students. This is not about winning a trophy. It's not about getting into schools that are at the tippy top of some defunct magazine's ranking list. It's about finding fabulous matches for each individual student. And again, we need to think about what that student's needs are and what schools meet those needs. And then the last thing, this is just a little pet peeve. I think we should ban the word safety. I think it implies that this school is lesser. I think safety should be thought of as your perfect match. They have everything you need and they want you, they admitted you, and you're going to be really happy at them. And there may be schools that are more selective on your list that maybe you'll be, crossing your fingers on decision day to see if you get in. But I think that every school on your list should be a school that you can see yourself at. I don't think you should see them as lesser or better just because the offer rates are different. Oh, by the way, one little small thing. A lot of people will say students need to create a new email account just for the college search. And that may be something the student wants to do. I would strongly suggest that in addition to that, or just instead of that, that the student learn to use the rules and filter function in their email. What they can do is set up a rule that filters any email from schools on their list into a folder. So when they open their email account, instead of being overwhelmed by an inbox that's full of marketing emails and notification emails from the different colleges, they can quickly scan one side of the email screen and say, okay, UVA wrote to me, let's see what they want. Do they need me to do something, or are they just giving me a newsletter? And then their inbox becomes kind of a miscellaneous inbox. It's a way so that those schools that are on the final list are first and foremost in a student's mind, and they don't miss a really important announcement from that school. Okay, last thing I'll say, admission officers are here to help you. That's why we exist at this time of year. I will be at Marshall, I think it's Tuesday, October 5th. I think it'll be in Naviance, I'm sure, for students who want to sign up. But there's someone here all the time during business hours to answer questions. I do want to point out that I do live Q&A sessions every Thursday afternoon on Instagram. My Instagram account is UVA Dean J. I also do a lot of advice posts on TikTok. And I have an admission blog, which was quiet for the summer, but it'll come back. And I try to do things that are about UVA, but also maybe applicable to other schools. So hopefully, if you're looking for more information, you can check those out. And as you can see here, I'm just saying that UVA does not use demonstrated interest. So ask whatever you want to ask. We're not taking notes. All right, that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let y'all hear from someone else.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lalonde. So now we have a few questions. I know Ms. Lalonde has to leave at 7, but we have some questions submitted in advance from the audience. And I'm going to go over them. I'll address the first couple, which she may want to address herself. And then if she wants to chime in and add or even completely change what I say, that's fine as well. So the first question that we got in, do colleges get to see what other colleges you applied to on the Common App? The answer is no, they do not. There used to be an issue with the FAFSA where they could see which other colleges that you sent your FAFSA to. But I believe they've taken that away. Ms. Lalonde may know differently or be able to update me on that one, but no, they cannot see through the Common App which other colleges you apply to.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say, I'm not offended by the fact that people are applying to lots of schools. That's the norm, right? But I applied to lots of schools too. I'm not sad about it. And for that matter, I don't really get upset if someone accidentally mentions another school. I kind of know if you're interested in UVA, I know what other schools you're probably checking out as well. I probably am friends with the admission officers at those schools. We all get along really well. It's interesting. Some people think that admission officers are in competition with each other. It's almost like saying that your English teacher should not like the English teacher, I don't know, at Meridian or you know, at one of the other schools. It just doesn't happen. We're all friends.
Great. Okay, the next one, can colleges see where you applied early decision, early action, or regular decision on the Common App? So that's the same, that one. That's a negative on that one. Let's see. And the rest, I believe, are Marshall specific questions. There's one more about letters of recommendation. I was wondering what the best timeline for following up with teachers who we already asked to write our letter of recommendation. So on that one, we have this big event, Junior Focus Day every year in the spring. Ms. Lalonde has been there before. And we asked, that's where we kick off the process with juniors about what to do, how to ask, and when to ask. So they start then. But if that question's referring to, say you've asked a teacher this year and you haven't heard back, I would go talk to the teacher in person if they're in the building, if you can, or email them if you're more comfortable doing that, and ask them if they are willing to write you the letter of recommendation. And if you don't hear a yes at all, then you can come to myself or your counselor for help. But if they already agreed to it, the next step is to give them a list of your deadlines and give them at least 4 weeks to write the letter, and give them that list of pointers, which are really just from that class. So things the teacher would have seen you do, personal characteristics, accomplishments, you know, projects, bullets that are specific to that class and not a general resume. So that's great to do with each teacher.
You just reminded me of something. Deadlines, when it comes to the Common App, are for the student. And though your counselors and your teachers will try to get everything in by the application deadline, we are totally cool if it takes them a little extra time. So they have a grace period. So deadlines are for students, teachers and counselors, they get a little more time. We understand that at some schools, they're putting together application materials for hundreds of students.
Yes, yes. But do check the policies, you know, for your specific colleges and figure out kind of, is there wiggle room there or how much? Okay, I think that is all of the general questions we have. We have a couple of Marshall specific ones, so I'll address those. But I wanted to thank you, Ms. Lalonde, very much for joining us. That was extremely helpful. And we'll see you at our college visit. So I know I was rushing through my portion earlier, but juniors and seniors, we have about 100 in-person visits this fall at Marshall. We have another set that are going to be just virtual on several Fridays, but this is a great 30-minute session with just that college. You get to ask all of your questions. You get the kind of inside scoop on how to do a real good job on the application. And and for colleges that do track demonstrated interest, there aren't very many of them, but sometimes that can give you a plus as well. So we look forward to seeing you then, and thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just say, y'all, it's totally appropriate to ask admission officers if they use interest. You can give them hard questions. That's why we're here. And the last thing I'll say, I cannot believe this wasn't asked, because I almost feel like it's required to be asked at all of my metro area schools. We don't have quotas, we don't have restrictions, and we don't have targets for anyone's high school, town, county, or region. It's the biggest rumor out there. I'm from right outside of New York City, a place that's a lot like Fairfax County. And I thought that we had restrictions and targets when I was a student applying to college, but students are not fighting with each other for a set number of spots from their high school. When at the beginning of the process, we don't even know how many people have applied yet, right? So there's no target, no quota. You're not competing for a set number of spots. That's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye, have a good night.
Bye-bye.